aspects. Now I would like to give the floor to Rabbi Abraham Skorka. He is the director of the Rabbinical Seminar in Buenos Aires, a physicist. We say it's the rabbi of Pope Francis, who was the Archbishop Bergoglio, had with you a lot of discussions on religion, the Shoah, etc. The floor is yours. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to this very important meeting in this very special moment. After everything we have listened to so far, I think it is relevant to reflect upon or to give a contribution from the biblical perspective, the biblical source that we share with Islam and Christianism to talk about how violence starts. The journalist Domenico Quirico has formulated some hard questions, difficult questions, that we must ask ourselves. What is the relationship between God and human violence? If God is merciful and has created men, how is it that we are not merciful as well? How come that we reach an individual situation in which we can kill in the name of God? I would like to analyze this issue. Please be patient. I'm going to quote many biblical verses, some passages from the Talmud, but I want to construct a vision, a message, a reflection rooted in these texts. From the narration of the creation of the universe and everything that in which God lives, all humans are descendants of one first man. There is not a superiority of races or of any other kind in this constituting narration of the Weltanschauung of the Bible. Verse 2.7 of the Genesis says God created man from the sand, from the clay, and blew the spirit of life, and man became a living being, Nefesh Hayam in Hebrew. The characteristic of having a breath of life does not define exclusively human beings, but it is the cardio-breathing activity of human beings, of living beings with lungs. Neshama has the same root as linshom, which means breathing, and this refers to the man with the beasts and animals in another part of the Genesis. The expression Nefesh Hayah is the second one that relates to human beings, and is also used for other living beings. Therefore, the man has and shares the same classification of animals. However, that verse, different from other species, it was God himself who blew the spirit on man. In the first part of Genesis, we see the difference between man and the other parts of creation, because there was this verbal imperative. It was created through the action of God. Therefore, let's make man So man is the direct creature of God and special in the universe. Due to this specific participation of God in the creation of man, we can conclude that there's some parts of God's breath in each human. Therefore, God talks to humans. Therefore, also, humans have the free will. They are ordered not to eat from the tree of knowledge. So man can decide choosing or rejecting God's commandments. Therefore, man can decide upon his decisions. The book of Deuteronomy, the fifth of the books of the Torah, describes the teaching of Moses before his death. When he finished his lesson, we find one of the most dramatic verses in the Bible. You are witnesses that life and death, blessing and you have to choose life so you can live and your descendants. It's the exclamation of who is close to God. So his disciples, his people, can always choose the path of life, because blessing therein is blessing. The path of life means love your God, listen to his voice, and be close to him, because he is your life. To be with him must be understood like choosing justice, equity, mercy, and piety as values that inspire life. The love to God must be understood as the comparison with other verses in the Torah, like the development of affection towards oneself and towards the neighbors. There is only when we can understand the neighbors, and then we will be able to understand love to God. Otherwise, everything else is paganism. Life teaches men that each moment of people's life demands a choice. These factors have been source of study throughout centuries. So one has to look for one's meaning of life. The Genesis teaches that the transgression of the first man and his wife, he and she, they chose to rebel against the teaching of God. There is something that incites them to trespass. The only limitation given by God, it was that initial snake, and the basic idea was you will become like God. You will know good and evil. The scholars have tried to understand this mystery. What does the snake represent? What did man learn from eating the fruit? The simple reading teaches us that the tale has to do with the sexual impulse. It tells us that they were naked and they were not ashamed, and they only knew about the nakedness after they ate the fruit. It is interesting to notice that to understand the cunning snake, the Bible uses an adjective, arum, which is homonym of the adjective used to describe nakedness. So eating that fruit of good and evil, of knowledge of good and evil, it means that there was not a damage, physical damage. They were aware of their nakedness, so they pick up some leaves and hid with them. So it was God Himself who made clothes for them when they left the garden. So it means that God's anger was for having eaten the fruit, and that the fruit itself was not damaging. The damaging result, is that the humans were started to hide from their Creator. So it seems that the only function of the tree was to remind the man that there was somebody else beyond him and next to him in life. More than the kaleidoscope of images, when we try to create an exegesis with the multiple aspects of the tale. The transgression, the trespassing, is the discovery of hiding of God. So it's God Himself that prepares the clothes for the man. Nakedness must be understood in the sense of Freudian libid. So this has to be understood with the capacity to sublimate the pulses of men to reach spiritual levels. We must underline the fact that only twice does God ask Israel to become holy. A holy food and holy body. So there is this link between spirit and body. So God says, let them be saints, holy as I am holy. So there's this contention of eating and sexual desires that allows them to be higher than animals and to find the godly breath in all of us. This is the commandment of God to Israel, that according to the wise men of Israel, they also mention all the number of rules commanded by God, the 7 laws. God will only reach greatness when He puts limits to His desires, and then He will discover His ambitions. They will never be in the place of God. They will never be like God, as the snake suggests. And many scholars see the snake as Satan. If this is a proposal, how come that the name of God has been the source of so many evil acts, far from His teaching? How can we find the relationship between religion and violence? Careful reading of the Bible reflects that what makes God be angry is not the lack of faith, but to change His image. The top sin in the desert was the idol, the gold idol they worshipped, not the lack of belief. So that is why the first commandment is to believe, not to believe in deities, and the second one is to believe in God. Both are united. One can only find faith in the biblical God, the one who can reject faith in other things. So having a special knowledge of godly knowledge is far from humans. So for men, that would mean to believe that God has accepted human's will. My thoughts are not like yours. My paths are not like yours, Isaiah says. So those who try to justify human suffering All those who want to do that are sinners in the sight of God. So men have to has to make offerings to expiate his sin. So the only way to worship God is through rectitude, truth, and piety. We profess, as the Psalms say, justice and equity are at the basis of your throne, and truth is the herald of your countenance. Those who try to eliminate humility and those who believe that the truth is in their behavior, they transform God in an idol. And the priests of those creed in the meditation on the Shoah, Pope Francis called to the reflection of those who to feel they have the power to decide upon life and destiny. So the Pope in Yad Vashem spoke against the essence of the belief of the men who want to control men and make men monsters, an empty religion. The dramatic situation claims for a common work of all those who have justice and love and mercy as values. This is the common denominator of all creeds who have the roots in the purity of men. Those who propagate hate, crime, and distractions are rooted in passions. They don't have religion. They are just manifestations of human misery.
Monsieur le rabbin Skorka, il était dit.
The rabbi's presentation was very interesting. It was difficult to interrupt this biblical study you offered, which is in fact a view on a global message. Even though you did take up a little bit more than the time allotted to you, we were able to listen to what you had to say with a great deal of interest. You mentioned something truly essential. In the fundamentals of the Bible, we can actually discover the exact reasons which have brought about the situation we live in today. And we can also discover the alternatives, the things that we can do to live differently. Because, as you reminded us of, according to God, man has a special role. Man created by God, man who has received life from God, man who has received life directly from God. And therefore, what is the role, the mission, and the duty of man? The duty of man is to listen to the Word of God, because man is God's creature. Man is the fruit of the breath of God. But man has separated from God, and this has brought about a great deal of evil. Since you are a saint, man, in turn, has to be a saint. That's what we have to remember. It's not that man isn't a saint because he lacks in faith, but because he has altered the image of God. The image of God that man promotes isn't the same image of the God that he received life from. And therefore, it is absolutely key to reestablish the image of God within man, so that all of the negative effects can be replaced by what God is and wants to be for man, a God of mercy, of love, and of peace. And therefore, if God is merciful, man in turn has to be merciful. Thank you for having